But man, it's just so embarrassing of a scene for him. Minus Aura too, it's just crazy. It's just so fraudulent, man. Like, what are we doing here?
Hey guys, this is Poohead189, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. Today I'm going to be making a small video response to the channel Carthu's Dojo, specifically a response to his video called Tien is a Fraud with Aura. As most of you know, I don't watch videos on Dragon Ball typically, I simply make them. I have never seen a video from Carthu's Dojo in my life, except for this one, after a few people mentioned this video to me and I posted a meme about it. This means that I have no opinion on Carthu's Dojo for or against, and am not commenting on his channel or himself in their entirety, only on the video itself. Before we get into it, I do want to say that I consider hit pieces and slander videos extremely lowbrow and contemptible. Sure, if you have an opinion and you dislike someone, okay. But people who make slander videos for a living, or it's their normal thing, I think are pretty petty people. And of course, people online also tend to be extremely gleeful and excitable on finding people they can acceptably shame and hate publicly. I would often say that social media is like the Roman mob, except worse, because at least the Roman mob was honest about wanting blood. I don't want to be in either group I just mentioned, and I also don't want any of my subscribers going to Carthu's Dojo and shitting on him. That being said, I will give my honest thoughts on his video and his points. However, first things first, right off the bat, I thought his title was somewhat misleading, which I tend to hate, but as I watched the video, I found out I was wrong. His title is not misleading. He is actually using the fraud rhetoric. And despite the points I'll give him for not having a clickbait title, I have to say that while he doesn't lie about the facts of the manga, he does misinterpret them and then completely skip over things. And I have to acknowledge that the entire fraud argument that he puts forth, which is a very common one for casual fans in social spaces, is in and of itself fraudulent in a sense, ironically. I don't think Carthu is attempting to be dishonest to his viewers, but the argument itself tends to be dishonest, and the reasons are twofold. One, the term fraud itself is defined as a person who is not what he or she pretends to be. People take this and generally stretch it to mean a character that is overhyped or misrepresented by a fan base. I think that muddies what would be an easy statement to make, which is they don't find Tien as cool as others say. Calling Tien Shinhan, or most characters for that matter, a fraud is not accurate, just in general. Tien does not pretend to be better than he is. He just acts like himself. In fact, he becomes extremely humble very quickly, after his initial appearance where he was arrogant. In fact, one of the most humble parts of him occurs in a portion of the manga that Carthu's Dojo actually just skips over. Secondly, the entire argument itself is flawed because it takes a two-dimensional approach to a three-dimensional situation. People tend to look at what a character accomplishes in the plot, and then they use that to justify whether or not a character is worth anything. Tien manages to accomplish a fair bit, in my opinion. However, you can use this logic to call anyone or anything a fraud. For example, the United States has dropped 1,030 nuclear bombs. Out of that number, only 2 have directly hurt anyone. This means that 1,028 have not, and therefore, the nuclear bomb is a massive fraud with a horrible track record. Do you see how this is a very dishonest and misleading way of arguing? This takes nothing about the nuclear bomb into account except what it has directly accomplished in warfare, not speaking about any of the soft accomplishments such as nuclear deterrence, popular culture, existential dread, the Cold Wars, or the context on why they haven't been used on a live population at any other times. Tien has done quite a bit. However, he is also impressive for the setting, the circumstances, and the odds he overcomes in order to accomplish what he does accomplish, and ignoring the immense context will be an incomplete picture. Like I said, you can say that about anything. Like, I think it's a huge accomplishment for Vegeta to become a Super Saiyan and then an Ascended Super Saiyan within a relatively short amount of time, and to damage Perfect Cell However, if at the end of the day we just ask, okay, but did he beat Cell? No, then he's a fraud. I feel like that's fairly asinine. With that being said, let's get into Carthu's video. Now, I'm going to post a few clips of Carthu throughout this video, but for the most part, I'm just going to be like reiterating what he says. If you want to see his video to make sure I'm not making anything up, I'll put the link in the description below.
Only for him to have a weird tournament run that does end up with him winning, but not necessarily in the way that you would give a cool character. Because if you remember correctly, Tien only won that tournament due to luck.
So he starts off in the video describing Tien's introduction, and he says Tien has a weird tournament run. And I completely agree. The 22nd tournament is my favorite tournament in all of Dragon Ball. However, if we focus solely on Tien, despite every fight being pretty peak in my opinion, it is quite strange if you look at it from his perspective. However, Carthu skips over Tien defeating Yamcha, and gets right to when Jackie Chun or Roshi decides to step out of the ring, kind of ignoring he does it because Roshi believes that Tien is strong enough to be a true opponent to Goku rather than just not feeling it. In fact, Carthu puts Roshi saying that on the screen, where Roshi says Tien is much better than he thought going in, and he was not thinking little of Tien before that. Of course, yes, there was a possibility Roshi could have potentially won, but most people can argue that it was likely Tien's match anyway, and he's certainly not a fraud because he was as surprised and angered by Jackie Chun's forfeiting as anybody. He wanted to keep fighting. That doesn't sound really fraudulent. Next we have Carthu giving a good point about Goku not having time to rest between matches, but of course it was Goku's decision and he clearly was not extremely tired. However, something I don't abide is when Carthu talks about how Tien begins to win because of Chaozu affecting Goku from outside of the ring, which means Tien was cheating. Is this true? Yes. But not only is it not fraudulent on Tien's part because he does not want to get outside help, but Carthu forgets that Goku received outside help too. When Tien uses the solar flare on Goku, Goku saves himself by taking Roshi's sunglasses and uses it to keep himself from being hit and potentially knocked out of the ring then and there, and uses it to land a huge hit on Tien's midsection. So we need to acknowledge that both fighters received outside help, one way or another. While yes, Tien got in a few more hits from his, Tien was not willing to have any help, whereas Goku actively sought out help. Now this doesn't reflect poorly on Goku, but for Tien, this seems the opposite of fraudulent to me. And of course, like I said earlier, he just completely blows over Tien's victory over Yamcha. Then we get to him saying Goku loses the battle only by dumb luck. However, every finale of the tournament, someone has lost due to some extremely minuscule lucky move. Roshi won by his legs being longer in the 21st one, Tien won by gravity and the truck in the 22nd one, and Goku won against Piccolo by his last tackle sending Piccolo out of the nearly decimated ring, when really both fighters were then unable to move. You can call every finale win fraudulent with certain logic. Then Carthu does give Tien some props for it not being his fault that Roshi incapacitates him when old King Piccolo arrives, and showcases Tien's great skill by learning the Mafuba or evil containment wave very quickly.
Great, man. This is not fraudulent at all. God, it's so bad for him. He's done nothing.
But then Carthu starts facepalming and contradicting himself and saying Tien has done nothing after he fights Drum and loses, ignoring not only his previous statement on Tien learning that technique extremely quickly, but also ignoring that Tien challenging King Piccolo kept the great Demon King there at the capital rather than killing millions of people in one of the provinces he drew from the lottery of numbers, and also kind of ignoring the fact Tien has done the most in the saga other than Goku and maybe Yajirobe, and the very fact he went to face King Piccolo alone and got in a solid hit on Drum, who should be more powerful than Tambourine and Cymbal since he was born from the youthful King Piccolo. It seems like up to this point, Tien is a solid major character. After that, Carthu points out Tien saves Goku but also is used as a hostage. He says it kinda nets even. It's hard to say just how damaged Goku would have been from the initial blast that King Piccolo does that Tien saves him from, but if Goku really might have been killed, then Tien's positive was more than the negative of being captured because Goku then won despite it all.
course, have the 3-year time skip to the 23rd Tenkaichi Budokai, where Tenshinhan fights Goku. And this is an all-timer great fight. It's just so fun to watch, so much energy, everything is great, it's so back and forth, until Goku reveals he's wearing weighted clothes the whole time, and then proceeds to just be way better than Tenshinhan for the rest of the fight. He literally pants Tenshinhan during this fight. That's embarrassing, man. That is disrespect on a different level.
Now, we go to the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament, where Carthu kind of completely forgets Goku calling Tien amazing twice, Kami saying Tien must be a true challenge, Piccolo saying even he had to admit he was impressed with Tien's speed, Yamcha being extremely impressed with Tien, and Krillin stating that he thinks Tien is a little too strong. And of course, Tien dominating and defeating Cyborg Tao. Carthu mentions literally none of this, and like I said, he skips over Tien's first round like he did with the last tournament. Eventually, yes, Goku does take off his training clothes and wins his fight with Tien, but Tien also literally does something impossible, which is split into 4 beings with the multiform, and even despite the weaknesses, he gets another great hit on Goku with his eye beams, where people think that Goku is suitably knocked out. Of course, Goku isn't, but he hits Goku enough to where Goku is clearly damaged. And despite all of this, Carthu is focusing on Tien's pants dropping, which, yes, is embarrassing, but it doesn't detract from Tien's accomplishments, especially considering all of this was Tien training without a master, while Goku was being taught by God or Kami.
Then, of course, we have another time skip. This one's 5 years until we reach the Saiyan Saga, where Tenshinhan doesn't do anything until the Nappa and Vegeta portion of this. He does manage to kill a Cyberman, which great. Basically, everyone on the battlefield on the human side could kill a Cyberman, even Yamcha. He just got caught off guard by the self-destructing one. So I think that's a little bit of plus for him. But aside from that, he basically doesn't do anything. He loses an arm to Nappa and then uses a Kikoho that does basically nothing to Nappa. I mean, it sears him a bit, but it doesn't damage him in any significant way. And then that attack just basically costs him his life. He thuds into the ground and it's over.
Fast forward, we go to the Saiyan Saga, where Carthu mentions Tien beats a Cyberman. However, everyone on the Z-Fighter's side can beat a Cyberman. That is true, what Carthu says is right, though he doesn't mention Tien does it without powering up and he does it in 2 hits, whereas it took Yamcha a bit longer. Though I will give Carthu points because he gives props to Yamcha, which I appreciate, acknowledging Yamcha would have totally defeated the Cyberman relatively easily if not for the suicide attack which no one expected. However, he does sort of move pretty quickly through the saga. Tien loses an arm, shoots a Tri-Beam or Kikoho, then dies. He doesn't mention that he was still capable of fighting and dodging Nappa's blows after getting his arm knocked off, and the fact Tien went out on his own terms, again, with 1 arm, and that's really badass to me. I think anyone who does that isn't a fraud, but we can agree to disagree.
Then we have Namek, which might be the biggest yikes moment for Tenshinhan as a character, and honestly every human that isn't Krillin, because Krillin has the benefit of getting his potential unleashed, while Tenshinhan, Yamcha, and Chaozu were all on King Kai's planet, learning none of his techniques and seemingly getting only a bit stronger. The Ginyu Force fight is only filler, so we're not really counting it here. The anime tried to throw them a bone, but we can't really use that here. You know, we're talking about the manga. We're talking about the canon meat and potatoes of this series, all right?
Next, however, is the Namek Saga, and this is where I and Carthu seem to have a fundamental disagreement on Dragon Ball. He believes that Krillin getting his potential unlocked is above and beyond what Tien or any other human can catch up with, whereas I have made multiple videos, especially on my Did the Human Surpass Frieza video, where I do a deep dive on the time spent training on King Kai's, the logic, and the Daizenshuu readings on Krillin and Gohan's powers in the Namek arc, and use it to calculate how strong the humans are in the Trunks arc and the Android Saga. I can't make a better argument here than I already did, so I suggest you go watch that if you're curious. However, Carthu believes the training benefits on King Kai's planet are minimal, and Tien is arrogant for Toriyama giving him a dedicated panel on him saying he'll put his own twist on King Kai's techniques.
Editing Carthu here. I actually forgot to mention that there's this one panel in the manga that's so funny with hindsight because Tien Shinhan is just so arrogant. He thinks he's gonna focus on mastering the fundamentals of King Kai's techniques and applying them to his own techniques and surpassing Goku with no difficulty, and this shit just doesn't happen.
Carthu also says that none of the human fighters learn any of King Kai's techniques, which is put into question during the Goku and Frieza fight, when Tien talks to King Kai knowingly about the Kaioken technique, saying at Goku's current strength he should be able to go to times 10. And of course, while Carthu is completely fair and accurate that the fight against the Ginyu Force is filler, I should also mention for the umpteenth time that Toriyama worked on the art for that episode, so he didn't find it egregious himself. And of course, Tien saying he'll learn the techniques and then put his own spin on them, one can easily deduce that is how he created the Neo Tri-Beam or Shin Kikoho. But that is also speculation, I'll admit. I just think one can easily see the dots, whereas Carthu either hasn't or doesn't want to. But I will say it says something that Toriyama specifically gives Tien an inner monologue about it, followed by him being the only human to really hurt or stop any of the next major antagonists. It feels fairly explicit to me, and I also don't think that Toriyama put that panel there to showcase Tien's arrogance, but his drive. Now, Carthu brings up Tien versus Krillin. This is something that I will skip. I can make this video if people want me to, but that's an entirely different discussion.
The Cell Saga, which is prime aura farming Tien Shinhan. He's got boulders for shoulders. He is rocking up into the sky above semi-perfect Cell and blasting that dude into the dirt. And this is like the biggest go-to moment that people think of for Tien Shinhan. It is like the humans returning. You know, we got androids, we have aliens, we have power levels, we have all this BS thrown into the series, and everything is thrown right back into Cell's face with Tien Shinhan basically flipping him off, saying, none of that matters, I'm still a goat. And that's the issue. That's what the big pretend is. He never was a goat. He was always a fraud from day one. He's reclaiming stature he didn't have. He's trying to rekindle a fire that was never lit. It just didn't happen. And it's kind of funny because we all bought it. Which I guess is a testament to Toriyama and his character work. But man, do you just look at this scene and you're like, yeah, Tien Shinhan, tell him how it is. Yeah, cook his ass.
Then we get to Tien holding back semi-perfect Cell, and Carthu putting words into Tien's mouth, I guess, on how he's trying to rekindle a fire that was never lit. Tien, of course, is not. He is sacrificing his life for the Earth, using a technique no one else can learn that even a Super Saiyan cannot survive, and beating Cell into the dirt to keep him from moving. He is correct, people often cite this as Tien's greatest moment, but there's a reason for it. Again, context matters.
It's just like, man, this is just a dude who got lucky in a tournament once.
Look, I don't know how Carthu tends to be, but he seems to be playing a character. I don't know if he's actually serious on his points sometimes. Like, look, I'm silly in my videos. I'm Poohead, of course I'm silly. I'll add memes in the middle of my videos. I'll put memes on the community notes. I'll make jokes in the middle of videos. People like it when I openly thirst, so I do that too. But whenever I meme or joke, I never do it at the expense of true information or a real message. Look, Carthu has over 1 million fucking subscribers on his main channel, way, way more than I'll likely ever have, so clearly people think he does something valuable. However, in this video, I don't think he's very convincing on making Tien look like a loser, at least to people who did not already share that belief. Unless this is a facetious video, it could be, I'm not sure. That tangent aside, let's continue.
But he does show up again in the Buu Saga. He does do a similar thing to his Cell performance where he just uses a Shin Kikoho, blasts away Buu's attack, the one attack that he could actually blast away because Buu just uses a stronger one that Tien Shinhan could do shit against after this and he gets knocked out. But he does something. He does one thing. It is something. It is minimal. It is not much, but it farms some aura. He stands there cool in his outfit with the hands posed up. Like he is stanced the fuck up and he looks cool doing it. And this is, again, these two scenes in Dragon Ball Z have carried Tien Shinhan for decades.
Then, of course, we have Tien showing up and helping out Gohan, Dende, Bee, and Hercule or Mr. Satan. It's true, Tien does not do much here, except save their lives, which I would think counts for something. In fact, while I haven't seen any other Carthu videos, a quick look at his channel shows he doesn't think Hercule or Mr. Satan is a fraud, yet without Tien the fraud, Hercule would be dead. And then after that, the Earth and the universe. But we can ignore that. Next, Bootinks uses a far more powerful Ki Blast and Tien cannot stop it, but I think we can all acknowledge that Mystic Gohan or Ultimate Gohan also did not stop the one Tien did, nor this one. So if we're putting Tien on Mystic Gohan tier, I think that's at least fairly good, but we can look past that as well. And then next, he starts talking about Dragon Ball Super.
And if you go by the Dragon Ball Super anime, Roshi might just be stronger than Tenshinhan as well. So it's not looking good for this guy at all. And when I was writing the notes for this, I was trying to figure out what would I say about modern Dragon Ball and Tenshinhan, but there's really nothing. Editing Carthu again, I just want to add that this scene in the Dragon Ball Super anime where Gohan and Goku and everyone else just forget Tenshinhan when trying to make a roster for the Tournament of Power is so unbelievably disrespectful, man. I just wanted to throw that in there real quick. Let's get back to the main recording. He is treated as a respected martial artist, someone who continues his training, who continues to pursue for higher levels of power, who thinks about the fact that there is always someone stronger and better. He follows the principles that Roshi instilled into Goku that helped Goku be such a supreme martial artist and fighter. But he gets none of the benefit. He gets completely sidelined, and honestly, he never really was in the limelight to begin with, more than a tournament he luckily won, and a fight with King Piccolo that he kind of net equals if he hindered or helped. I think it's a really strange position to be in. I think he's cool. I would love to see the humans get their own, Orange Piccolo treatment in some regard, where they get their time in the spotlight. Maybe have Orange Piccolo, Gohan, Vegeta, Goku, Broly go do some Black Frieza stuff off-world, and something happens to Earth at the same time, where the humans really need to step up and take command. But honestly, at this point, it is so tough to imagine a world where Tenshinhan is redeemed in any meaningful way, and I'm just so surprised that no one talks about the fact that he's kinda always been a fraud. Well, at least he's still aura farming. Alright, that's all I want to say. See you later.
You guys know I don't cover Super. I don't know Super extremely well. However, while the episode he showcases with him fighting Roshi is kind of a bad showing for Tien, I will say that when that episode aired, friend of the channel Clearin and Dave and I all thought the same thing, wondering how or why Roshi was stronger than Tien, and then one of them found a tweet, I forgot if it was Dave or Clearin, from one of the Japanese animators on Twitter, confused on why someone would think Tien was weaker than regular Roshi, saying that's not true. I'd need to find it again, it was like 7 years ago now. If you don't want to take my word for it, I completely understand. However, while I don't delve into Dragon Ball Super, me and the lads did watch DBS as it aired in Japan on these clandestine streaming sites, without subtitles actually, like they were literally airing on Japanese TV and we were watching that initial airing, and then we watched it with subtitles after on our own time. We're just kinda like that. But that particular Roshi vs. Tien episode, I do distinctly remember one of the animators wondering why people thought Tien wasn't stronger than Roshi. Granted, the animator did not do a good job showing Tien's strength, but do with that information as you will. Either way, I will not really discuss anything in Dragon Ball Super, whether it's good or bad for Tien, but I think I have made a good enough response on the meat of Carthu's video to debunk it, or at least give my 2 cents. If you guys believe I was unfair, please let me know. If Carthu sees this, I hope I wasn't too harsh because I don't want to start a conflict, but I hope at least some people thought this video was worth making. Also, I will say Carthu does mention Tien saying goodbye, and he'll probably never see any of them again. I should make a short video on that, though if you guys listen to my talk with Smugstick, you already know my opinion on it. Anyway, if you guys are interested, I'm currently making videos on science fiction and fantasy all month on my other channel. This past week, I've delved into Elder Scrolls, and coming up will be Warhammer Fantasy and 40k, as well as some Lord of the Rings videos, maybe a little bit of Star Wars. So if you subscribe to that channel, remember to click the bell icon because a subscription does not guarantee you'll see when the videos drop. And likes and comments mean a lot to me on both channels, but especially that one. All my social media links are below, as is the Discord, and I hope you guys have a great day. See you next time. Bye-bye.